it's funny, I had asked not to have, this is a strange little thing, but I had asked that teachers not offer a gigantic amount of extra credit for students to come. Because I legitimately wanted just a little bit, it's fine. But I had, because what I genuinely wanted is for people to experience this for the love of what it is. I have been teaching Sandra's poetry for a while. And so one year I had said, God, I wish that she had her, would it be cool if it was just, I remember we're in the library and I was teaching creative writing and I said, we're teaching one of her poems. It'd be great if she had like her rough drafts available, like that would be interesting if she had a rough drafts available and we could kind of look at the changes, because we were talking about revision. And then this girl, Sarah, whose name I can't think of right now, but she would be amazed that you're here, by the way. She goes, why don't you just email her? And I remember flushing, like I just got kind of panicky just at the thought of it. And I was like, I could do that, but I got to get a sub that day to just write the email. I'm going to need to be at home to prepare myself to write it, And later that day I emailed thinking, this would be kind of neat to have her come and speak. And we have a guest poet every year. And within like several hours she responded. So I called for a sub. And I went home and I read it. And she said, inconveniently I'm getting married around that time, which is fine. It is what it is. But now she's here, and I'm not going to go crazy with the awards. She's lauded. Let me just say that she's out of DC now. She's out of DC, but she has 2 books of poetry, a third coming out in June. I am going to try to get the awards right. I Was the Jukebox is her most recent book of poetry, and it won the 2009 Barnard Women's. Yeah, I keep saying Bernard. What are you looking so anemic for, Bernard? Anybody? Her debut book, Theories of Falling, was selected by Maria Howe as the winner of the 2007 New Issue Poetry Prize. So both shockwaves in the poetry community. Really. And then she has a memoir, Don't Kill the Birthday Girl, Tales from an Allergic Life, which we got to experience because we went out to dinner with her last night and we got to see the allergy strategy ordering thing and today, and it's really amazing. That the book is outstanding. It is one of the 3 of hers I've read. Honestly, this is like the pinnacle of my life. The marriage is great. Everything's great, but this is going to be wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. She's going to read some stuff from, I think, the memoir as well. Yeah, from everything, and take questions and all that jazz. And what do you come up? Sandra Beasley.
Aw, I'm a big fan of magic. I once kissed a guy who was doing coin tricks in Las Vegas. It was his job. He was getting paid by the hour to do coin tricks at one of the magic shops. Never got his name, never saw him again. Just got kissed though.
You never said that earlier. It's the first time I'm hearing that. They chose to say that when there's in a public place.
Well, I did mention earlier, but I did have my fabulous cameo in a certain episode of Mondo Magic. Ooh, see, we all have these little moments up our sleeve. I'm really thrilled to be here today. I've just had an incredible day of conversations about poetry, about life. I made the observation, I was saying early on that for me, poetry has really been a way to travel the world. I mean, just to put a tangible aspect to that, the car that I drive now, I acquired in late 2010, and it is now at 90,000 miles. The majority of those have been driven in pursuit of poetry, getting to meet communities like yours, going to schools, going to art colonies, driving to places everywhere from Vermont to Miami, and all the way out towards Colorado. And it has been for me a really important, wonderful way to see the world. That is one way in which we are poets. We're poets because we pursue adventures and we get poems from that. However, Sure. There's another important way in which we're poets, and that is that we have to both know how to travel and how to stay still. I was kind of breaking the ice of this fortunate but onerous list of awards and stuff by mentioning things like I collected slinkies when I was younger and I was on Mondo Magic. And one thing is I also collected four-leaf clovers. I was really good at standing in a field long enough to spot the four-leaf clovers out amidst the threes. And I think at one point I had in laminated plastic something like 67 four-leaf clovers, which means I should still be living out some good luck in the years to come. And I mention that because I think that is also an important part of being a poet, is slowing down and finding the shapes, the unusual shapes amidst the banality of our everyday, and recognizing that there's magic there. So I hope that if you're in the audience today because you are working on your own poems or just passionate about it, that you recognize that the art of poetry is both racing forward, pursuing adventures, but also knowing when to hold still. Someone mentioned this poem this morning. It's the opening poem from it's called Cherry Tomatoes. It's the opening poem from Theories of Falling. Like many poets, I started out as a student of poetry, and I had one class where the professor had covered the table with objects from the natural world. Shells, branches, dried flowers, all this beautiful stuff. And each student was asked to grab an object and write an ode to it. An ode is a celebratory poem. Pablo Neruda wrote odes to things like watermelon and socks. And I was out of the room when this happened. I was getting a drink of water. Came back in, all the shells were gone, the pretty rocks were gone, the branches were gone. All that's left is a pint of cherry tomatoes. I was not inspired. I had never eaten cherry tomatoes, but I took them home because that was the assignment, and I started thinking, why? What is my relationship to this object? So what I wrote was not an ode, it was more like an anti-ode, but I did learn a thing or two. Cherry tomatoes, little bastards of vine, little demons by the pint, red eggs that never hatch, just collapse and rot. When my mom told me to gather their grubby bodies into my skirt, I'd cry. You and your father, she'd chide, the way each time I kicked and wailed against sailing, my dad shook his head, said, you and your mother. Now a city girl, I ease one loose from its siblings, from its clear plastic coffin, place it on my tongue just to try. The smooth surface resists, and erupts in my mouth, seeds, juice, acid, blood of a perfect household. The way when I finally went sailing, my stomach was rocked from inside out. Little boat, big sea, handful of skinned sunsets. A lot of poems in Theories of Falling have a relationship to food, and I think it's really useful to mention that we can move our life material across boundaries. So I grew up with these ridiculous food allergies: milk, eggs, some tree nuts, mango, cantaloupe, melon, mustard, swordfish. And some of these allergies are so severe that, cucumber, I was thinking about that at lunch. So severe, but it's not just that I can't eat it. It might be that if I go on a date with someone and they eat it, I know that I can't kiss them at the end of the night. I need to modify this now that I'm married to say, when my husband eats ice cream, I'm less likely to be able to kiss him at the end of the night. So I finally found a way towards this life material in poetry. And so I just want to read a couple of sections from Allergy Girl, and then a very small snippet from the memoir, just to get at the idea of how we can move our life through different genres, how different qualities of that life come out. So I was born in 1980, an era when food allergies were not nearly as commonly diagnosed or as well understood as they are now. Who here either has food allergies or knows someone with them? Okay, so we've got EpiPen, got one in my purse. Benadryl, got that too. Imagine a couple of parents with their firstborn trying to bond the best way they know how, through food, through nourishment, and having that effort to feed be the very thing that is killing her, making her sick. Allergy girl. Wasting, a hunger so great I bite through a pacifier. My mother tries to fix me with more milk, more milk. Doctors run tests on my squalling body. No breast is safe, no cow, goat, soy milk. I nurse on apple juice. My parents agree on one rule: don't break the baby. They pour quarters into the arcade game of adulthood, working the mechanical claw right, left, right, back, aiming for the stuffed bear, missing. A clutch of cheesecake, a buttermilk biscuit, each time my lips swelling, breath skipping. They pace the ER. Did we break the baby? My mother dissects labels: casein, protein, lactolate, easier to cook from scratch. My father perfects, shh, it's not that bad. You can breathe, breathe. They cradle me in Benadryl. That's the secret of marriage. Bleary silence in white rooms, too busy not breaking me to take the wrecking ball to each other. I would often, nowadays I feel like there's a lot of products available that are designed to make it safe. Like allergy, a lot of times they'll say allergy friendly, which is kind of a little bit of an odd, we would use the phrase Sandra friendly, but there's really no such food as, there's no entirely allergen free food. There's almost always someone out there allergic to it. I would beg and plead to have a birthday cake every year that looked like that which my friends had. Duncan Hines, white frosting, which meant that more years than not, I would participate in making a cake that I could not eat. And I would take it to school, and I'd share it with all my friends, and by sharing, I mean watch them eat it. And then my mom would, at the beginning of each year, drop off a set of Sandra-friendly treats, and my teacher would pull them out. So I'd get my 12 hazelnuts or 12 gumdrops. Stacking bowls, cupping flour, greasing the square pan with sunflower margarine. At 12, I am safe if I stick to these surfaces of baking. When my mother's back is turned, I trespass, caressing the mixer, settling a knife in the butter. I tap an egg to the bowl's hungry lip, stop at the half crack. She is the one who makes the cake's heart beat, pouring milk, whipping in vanilla, taking yolks from whites. I'm charged with the toothpicks, foil, arranging pink sugar letters pebbled with yellow that spell out happy birthday. I balance the pan in both hands all the way to school, picturing my whole class with plates out, singing the high tones of duty. Before our teacher divvies it up, careful not to touch me. Before someone says, I ought to try a slice, at least the frosting, and gets shushed. Before they watch as I line up 12 birthday gumdrops in the pencil groove of my desk. And just one more section from this. Nowadays, kids exist in spheres where they have maybe one reaction in their lifetime, and that's it. I envy that. I grew up with reaction after reaction. I had so many allergens, and they came at us from so many different angles. You need to go on the nebulizer. No. I was 10. If you don't, we'll use the EpiPen, a needle that could shoot through denim. So I gave in to that high altitude taste, oxygen constellated with epinephrine, a sound rushing, insistent. They fitted green straps over my ears. All I could think of were those masks that drop from the airplane ceiling when you fall more than 500 feet in 1 second. That's it. My mother, a stewardess, perfect and distant. Relax. They fed me sky, until my lips grew cold. Now I have learned to be a bad patient. I refuse IVs, I knock back 2 Benadryl with vodka, asleep before asking anyone to check each hour for breath. When that long itch starts up my throat, I buy a large fries, scarf them down, sure this greasy mash will shield my stomach from the egg or melon or milk protein. Same as that doomed girl in seat 14C, who knows her plane is plummeting, is impatient for the crash, but still sneaks the shade shut between her and the ground, rushing toward glass double paned for her safety. So, I was dealing with this material, and I loved working in poetry, but I also wanted to tell the science, the cultural analysis, the backstory. I wanted to look at food for a hub for the larger ways in which we live. And so I got the chance to write this book, Don't Kill a Birthday Girl, Tales from an Allergic Life. I often have to remind people that it's a memoir, it's not a manual. Types of allergy-specific behaviors, like the one described in that last poem, not the best way to handle it. But you know, we use the coping mechanisms available to us at that time. I find that writing about food allergies in prose gives me a chance to tease out some of the humor, some of the absurdity, as well as some of the factual information, because food allergies are such a unique thing in that so many parents are parenting children without they themselves having any firsthand experience. And so I wanted to write something that could help bridge that divide. So I'm just going to read a few paragraphs that open up kind of in that same era. Early 1990s, I attended elementary school in Northern Virginia, and in some ways they were very accommodating, and in some ways, less so. This is from a chapter called I Am Jane's Anaphylactic Shock. In the early 1990s, many Americans were swept up by an interest in healthy eating. The U.S. Department of Agriculture began working on its food guide pyramid, which would be released in 1992. When I first heard about this pyramid in the 4th grade, I assumed it was based on the cuisine of Egyptians. Blame the World History Unit we'd finished only a few days earlier. So I imagined the pantries of ancient Cairo, fish, cakes of grain, honey, tiger nuts, and the occasional wayward canopic jar of kidneys. My 4th grade teacher invited a professional nutritionist, the mother of one of the other students, to come in for a lesson on maintaining a proper diet. She was a short, trim, olive-skinned woman with a clipped voice, and she moved her pointer with enthusiastic precision over each part of her diagram, which presaged the portions that would be recommended by the USDA. She began by suggesting, and remember the era here, a soft, cushiony foundation of 6 to 11 servings of grain per day. And this was when Wonder Bread and brown rice stood side by side as equals in the ranks of starch. Beans and beef, eggs and nuts, all were packed neatly into the same block of 2 to 3 servings of protein. 3 glasses of whole milk. Yep, according to her diagram, that was the way to go. She tapped her pointer against the pyramid's penultimate tier. Milk prevents osteoporosis, she intoned. No one asked the obvious. What was osteoporosis? Instead, one of my classmates raised her hand. What if you don't drink milk? She asked. There's cheese if you don't like the taste of milk, the nutritionist replied. The important thing is your daily calcium intake. What if you don't eat cheese? The nutritionist paused. You should eat eggs, she said. What if you can't eat eggs? Another kid asked. I knew what they were getting at. 3 days earlier had been a much anticipated pizza party, and I'd gone to the library instead to avoid exposure, which prompted an explanation of my long list of food allergies. My classmate raised his hand. What if you can't have beef, or ice cream, or pizza, not even if you pick the cheese off? Well, the nutritionist said brightly, that's not somebody designed to survive, now is it? She continued on to fats, oils, and sweets as I slumped down in my chair. So Don't Kill the Birthday Girl has a lot of stories, not all quite along those lines, but you can see how it's a different rhythm. It's a different way to build a story, to introduce a character, to deliver a punchline rather than a closing couplet. But the great thing about writing about your life is then not writing about your life, which led to, there's a collection called I Was the Jukebox, which the students spend a lot of time with it today, but it's full of pushing against the convention of the poet as speaker. And so you have poems in the voice of a platypi, or a piano, or an orchid, or in the case of the title poem, a jukebox. Oh, first off, who here has seen a real jukebox? One of those fat guys in the corner. Okay, good. Sometimes I read this poem and then I realize like people are picturing their iPods or they're picturing little electronic boxes on the wall that you can run with a credit card. No. If you haven't heard a real jukebox, you gotta go find one. You were you. I dreamt we were in your favorite bar. You were you, I was the jukebox. I played Sam Cooke for you, but you didn't look over once. I wanted to dance. I wanted a scotch. I wanted you to take your hand off of her. You were wearing your best smile and the shirt that makes your eyes green. If you'd had asked, I'd have told you her hair looked like plastic. But then my mouth was plastic. I weighed 300 pounds. I glittered like 1972. A man tried to seduce me with quarters, but I could hear his truck outside, still running. I was loyal to you. I played Aretha, Marvin, the Reverend Al. You kissed her all the way out the door. Later, I tried to make my own music, humming one circuit against the other, running the needle up and down. The bubbles in my blood were singing. In the morning, they came to repair me.
Can I ask something?
Yeah, we have a question from the audience.
Mm-hmm.
A plant, a ringer.
A plant. So we were talking about how a persona poem can be liberating for a writer, especially a beginning writer who's trying to find, but you're not so much like a beginning writer. So where's the balance? I don't need the autobiography, I suppose, but I like it. But where's the balance here between the liberation of being a jukebox and, where you are in that poem? How much does it matter that what you're writing is completely fictional, and how much does it matter what in the poem actually happened? Like Cherry Tomatoes, now I'm all freaked out now because I figured your dad was a sailor and your mother was a farmer, and I emailed this to you and you're like, yeah, no. And then, but the fact that it came from this creative writing prompt with an object, this is
new information. Yeah.
So,
I think I was saying two things that I was saying at various points earlier. One was that for me, You Were You, the poem I just read, had to do with the tipping point of recognizing that this was going to be a new book, a different book from Theories of Following. Two, I was fairly young in my process of exploring the persona poems. If I wrote this poem today, so another thing that I said at one point this morning was this process of revision. You can always revise. Ultimately, you don't so much feel like you got the poem exactly right as you do abandon it and fall in love with the next thing. If I were writing this poem today, and if I were understanding the context it had in the manuscript, I probably would have cut the opening line. I dreamt we were in your favorite bar. I probably would have gone straight to You Were You, I Was the Jukebox. As in, back then, in the moment of writing this, I still needed that human bridge. I still needed the act of dreaming to cause the displacement. So to me, this is a poem where there's more of a vestige of humanity in this than in some of the other ones, which are really just committed explorations of weirdness. And there is great pleasure to be had in committed explorations of weirdness. And I think that, this is also a poem for me that deals with myth. I was thinking about, the story of Echo and Narcissus. Echo, who is fated to never have words of her own, but only be able to repeat the words of others. I think of jukeboxes as figures of desire who are never allowed to create their own songs. They're always sentenced to play what's, so the pathos in the poem is that kind of effort to play its own music, which is misinterpreted as being malfunct. Yeah. I'll read one more poem from this collection, and then I'll wrap with a couple of new ones. So ever since 2009, I've had the pleasure of being a traveling poet, a working poet, which means at times an unpaid poet, a starving poet, a on couches poet. And again, that's why I really want to thank the school for having me here today, making me feel so welcome and so cared for. It's really important. I dedicate this poem to anyone who's been unsure how they're going to keep all the balls in the air and do what they want to do as a passion, and also keep a roof over their heads and food on the table and health insurance in the pocket. It's called Vocation. For 6 months, I dealt baccarat in a casino. For 6 months, I played Brahms in a mall. For 6 months, I arranged museum dioramas. My hands were too small for the Paleolithic, and when they reassigned me to lichens, I quit. I typed 91 words per minute. All of them help. Yes, I speak Dewey Decimal. I speak Russian, Latin, a smattering of Tlingit. I can balance 7 dinner plates on my arm. All I want to do is sit on a veranda while a hard rain falls around me. I'll pile your 1099s. I'll make love to strangers of your choice. I'll do whatever you want as long as I can do it on that veranda. If it calls you, it's your calling, right? Once I asked a broker what he loved about his job, and he said, making a killing. Once I asked a serial killer what made him get up in the morning, and he said, the people. So the collection I have coming out in June is called Count the Waves. I'm getting to work with W.W. Norton again, which is a great publisher. And they are poems that deal with intimacy across long distance. The idea that being far away from someone prevents certain aspects of a relationship and liberates other aspects of that relationship. And so I think the poems are often about longing, and in particular there's a whole bunch of poems that are in dialogue with this really weird book that was published in 1853 by a guy named A.C. Baldwin. And what it was a list of 8,000 plus phrases or sentences with the idea that if you were far away from someone, you could communicate by telegram and essentially have discretion, and it was cheaper too. So rather than writing out whole elaborate letters to someone, you could just telegraph them these numeric codes, and they on the other side could translate it into the proper letter. He called this book The Traveler's Vade Mecum, or Instantaneous Letter Writer by Mail or Telegraph for the convenience of persons traveling on business or for pleasure, and for others, whereby a vast amount of time, labor, and trouble is saved. Very long title for a book supposedly dedicated to efficiency. And so there's about 24 poems, and we're going to read all of them. No, I'm just going to read a couple, that are in dialogue with this traveler's vade mecum. And in each case, the title is an actual line that you can look up. And I think one of the cool things that I was talking about with the students earlier about being a poet is that you're encouraged to study things, to learn things that you might not otherwise know. So for example, the poem I want to read has the title, Flower is Firm. That's line 4,234 of A Traveler's Vade Mecum. It caused me to think about, why would you ever telegraph someone? Well, the key is that the idea is flour as a stock, as a commodity. The value of flour is firm. But this was also an era in which hardtacks, this was the Civil War era, so soldiers are carrying hardtack around, which if you've ever seen hardtacks is super durable food, and so in that sense, flour is also firm. The Traveler's Vade Mecum, line 4,234. Flour is firm. Baking 2 parts flour to 1 part water could stop a bullet. So good soldiers carried their hardtack over their hearts. Break it down with a rifle butt, flood it, fry it in pig fat to make hellfire stew. Gnaw it raw and praise the juice. Does wheat prepare for this as it grows, seeking the light in a half-thawed field? Do stalks know their strength is merely in their number? What is ground down we name flour in promise that it will be made useful. Otherwise, it's just dust. Sheet iron crackers, teeth dullers. Would you call it starving? If a man dies with hardtack still tucked in his vest, can you call it food? If a bullet comes only at the moment he gives in and swallows. Line 6,459 of the Traveler's Body Mecum, the country is quite mountainous. The goats of Kauai care little for our taxonomies. No one has told them they are not mountain goats. No one has shown them the logs of Captain Cook, who seeded their ancestors with a casual hand. No one has spoken of how the villagers stabbed him, face down in the surf, before baking his skeleton free of flesh. The goats gambol and bray on the cliffs. They do not stop at the dirt. They chew to the root. We watch them from our little ship, floating in a bigger blue thing they have no name for, under the pull of our hot daily something. But these goats, they orbit nothing. They move no way but forward. And I'm just going to finish with one last poem from this book. We were talking a lot all day about the dividing line between the biographical and the aesthetic, the invented and the real. And what I would mention is that my secret for you with this next poem is that I think it is, for me, actually a personal poem of place. For many years, I have lived within walking distance of DC's National Zoo. And there's a lot of exhibits that kind of vary in their availability, but the open bird atrium is almost always open, which means quality peacock time. I have spent more time walking around with peacocks in the course of a given week than most people will ever spend over the course of a lifetime. They're great creatures. So for me, when I'm thinking peacocks, I'm really thinking right there. Inventory. We gaze into your eyes, 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 eyes. We forget the display is blind. Your fan's tail, really a cupped palm, gathering each hen's quiver to your ear, your feathers, the green-blue glamours of reflective absence. No one ever praises the ass of a peacock, grin of quills that does the heavy lifting, or how you eat anything from ants to styrofoam, from cheese to chicken. Road roamer, flower devourer, the one who will pick a fight with a goat. Preen all you want. What I praise of you will be the bare undercarriage, the calamus. I am done with beauty. Only a blinking eye can measure the light. Thank you.